Ma'am, this vehicle matches a stolen car report from earlier today. I need you to step out.
You haven't run my plates. My registration is current. I've owned this car for 40 years. What specific description are you working from?
Ma'am, I'm not here to debate with you. You fit the description. Step out of the vehicle now.
Here is my registration. I am asking you again, what is the description you are matching?
Officer Dale Voss of the Hills Estate Patrol Division had stopped over 40 drivers on Cedarwood Gate Boulevard in 8 months, and not one of them was white. The night he lit up his blues behind a black Mercedes E350 and told its driver she matched a stolen vehicle report, he spoke to her like a verdict had already been reached. What Dale Voss didn't know was that the woman gripping that steering wheel had spent the last 11 years dismantling corrupt police departments in federal court, and his badge number was about to become the most searched term in the city. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe that a badge should never be a weapon against the people it was sworn to protect, hit that like button and subscribe to Resurrecting Justice. Because justice doesn't always arrive on time. But on this channel, it always arrives. Hills Estate is the kind of neighborhood that doesn't advertise itself. There are no billboards pointing toward it off Route 9, no flashy signs at the entrance. What there is a set of black iron gates at the corner of Pembroke Lane and Cedarwood Gate Boulevard, a security booth that's manned 24 hours, and a silence so deliberate it feels purchased. Because it was. Properties here start at $1.4 million. The lawns are maintained by contractors who arrive before sunrise and leave before the residents wake up. The streets are so clean you could mistake them for a film set. Hills Estate sits in the northern pocket of Caldwell County, tucked just behind the Ashford Terrace Ridge, and it operates on one unspoken agreement that the people who live here have earned a certain kind of peace. Rochelle Dalton, 44, had earned hers the hard way. She pulled off the I-78 exit at 7:14 in the evening, her black Mercedes E350 moving quietly through the descent into the lower Cedarwood stretch. She had been in court since 8 a.m. Not in the audience, not at a desk in the back. At the front, standing between her client and a system that had already decided to chew him up. Rochelle was a civil rights attorney, a partner at Dalton and Rice Legal Group on Harmon Avenue downtown, and in 11 years of practice she had filed injunctions, won jury verdicts, and argued successfully before the state appeals court in cases that made the kind of headlines departments tried to bury. She had taken on 3 cases against Caldwell County's own 4th precinct. She had won 2 of them. The 3rd was still active. Her briefcase sat on the passenger seat. Her blazer was still on. She hadn't even had time to take it off. In the back seat, 16-year-old Isaiah sat with his earbuds half in, geometry homework open across his lap, watching the familiar trees of Cedarwood Gate pass by the window. He had made this drive home with his mother hundreds of times. He knew every turn. He knew the speed bumps near the Hollowell cul-de-sac, the way the streetlights flickered slightly near Gate Post 7, the exact moment the road curved and their house on Pembroke Lane came into view. Isaiah was a quiet kid, thoughtful in the way that sometimes made teachers underestimate him until his test scores came back. He didn't talk much in groups. He watched. It was something his mother had always noticed about him, something she privately believed would serve him well one day. He had his phone in his hand when the patrol car passed them going the other direction. It was a white and gray Hills Estate contracted cruiser. Not a county vehicle, a private patrol unit hired by the Homeowners Association and given limited law enforcement authority under a county agreement. Officer Dale Voss was behind the wheel. Voss had been with the Hills Estate Patrol contract for 3 years, assigned out of a private security firm called Meridian Protective Services, which held the HOA contract. He was 31 years old, and he had the kind of confidence that comes not from experience but from never having been seriously challenged. His personnel file, had anyone examined it carefully, contained 2 resident complaints filed in the last 18 months. Both had been submitted by black residents. Both had been marked resolved without a formal hearing. Voss passed the Mercedes doing about 28 miles per hour. For a half second, nothing happened. His cruiser kept moving. Rochelle kept driving. The evening held. Then his brake lights came on. Rochelle saw them in her rearview mirror and felt something tighten in her chest. Not panic, not surprise. Something older than both of those things. A kind of knowing that lives in the body before the mind catches up. She watched the cruiser slow to a crawl. She saw the reverse of the signal. And then she watched Dale Voss make a full U-turn on Cedarwood Gate Boulevard and come up behind her. The lights came on at 7:16 p.m. Blue and white, cutting through the quiet dusk of Hills Estate like something had gone wrong. Though nothing had, not yet, not on her end. Rochelle eased the Mercedes to the right and brought it to a stop just past the 2,200 block of Cedarwood Gate, in front of a row of perfectly trimmed hedges outside a property she knew belonged to the Marchetti family, who had a golden retriever named Scout and waved to her every Sunday morning. In the back seat, Isaiah pulled one earbud out. He looked at the lights. He looked at his mother's eyes in the rearview mirror. And without a word, without being told, without hesitation, he picked up his phone, opened the camera, and pressed record. Rochelle rolled down her window. Voss approached slowly, one hand loose at his side, and when he reached her door, he looked at her for a moment before he spoke a look that lasted just a second too long. The kind of look that wasn't about a stolen car. "Ma'am," he said, his voice already carrying the weight of a conclusion. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Rochelle kept her hands visible on the steering wheel. "I do not," she said. "Can you tell me?" Voss tilted his head slightly. "This vehicle matches the description of a car reported stolen earlier today out of the Ashford Terrace area. I'm going to need you to step out." Rochelle didn't move. "You haven't run my plates," she said calmly. "My registration is current, my insurance is current, and this vehicle has been in my name for 4 years. I'd like to know what specific description you're working from before I exit my car." Something shifted in Voss's expression. Not confusion. Something closer to irritation. Like she had answered a question he hadn't expected her to understand. Behind her, Isaiah kept the camera steady. The recording had already been running for 90 seconds, and the night, which had been so quiet, was only getting started. Most people, when a police officer tells them to get out of the car, get out. Not because they've done something wrong, but because the uniform carries a weight that most people don't feel equipped to push back against. Rochelle Dalton was not most people. She had spent 11 years in courtrooms watching what happened when people complied without question. When they stepped out, handed things over, and trusted that cooperation would protect them. It rarely did. So she kept her hands on the steering wheel, kept her voice even, and asked Dale Voss a second time to tell her exactly what stolen vehicle description she was supposed to match. Voss didn't answer the question. Instead, he took a small step back from her window and crossed his arms. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask you again. Step out of the vehicle." That shift from explanation to command was the first sign of where the night was heading. Rochelle reached slowly toward her glove compartment, told him clearly she was reaching for her registration, retrieved it, and held it out through the window. Voss looked at the document but didn't take it. He hadn't run her plates yet. He hadn't called in the stop properly. He was operating entirely on what he had decided the moment he looked through her window and saw her face. And now that she wasn't folding, he didn't quite know what to do with that. So he made the situation bigger. He stepped away from her window and got on his radio. Within 4 minutes, a second cruiser turned onto Cedarwood Gate Boulevard and pulled up behind Voss's vehicle. Officer Colt Briggs stepped out. Briggs was newer to the Hills Estate contract than Voss, quieter in personality. But the moment his feet hit the pavement, he fell into formation beside his colleague without asking a single question about what had actually happened. That was its own kind of problem. He didn't ask to see the registration Rochelle had already offered. He didn't ask Voss whether the plates had been run. He simply arrived and added the weight of a second uniform to a situation that hadn't warranted the first one. By this point, 3 neighbors had come outside. A man from the property across the street stood on his front steps with his arms folded, watching. A woman 2 doors down had stopped walking her dog. Another resident watched from behind a half-open garage door. Nobody intervened. Nobody said anything. But they were watching, and that matters, because what happens in front of witnesses and what gets reported later are 2 different things. Voss told Rochelle that given her refusal to exit the vehicle, he now intended to call for a full stop verification and that he had the right to search the car. Rochelle told him, still calmly, that she had not refused anything, that she had asked for a lawful reason to exit, and that a search required either her consent or probable cause, neither of which he had established. She also told him she was an attorney. Voss's expression didn't change much, but something behind his eyes did. Briggs leaned slightly toward Voss and said something low that Rochelle couldn't fully hear. Whatever it was, it didn't slow anything down. Voss came back to her window and told her that her behavior was making a simple situation complicated, and that if she had nothing to hide, stepping out would clear everything up in 5 minutes. That line, "if you have nothing to hide," is one of the oldest pressure tools used in these stops. It flips the burden. It makes the person being questioned feel like their resistance to an unlawful demand is itself suspicious. Rochelle had argued against that exact logic in court. She knew what it was. She named it internally, and she still didn't move. In the back seat, Isaiah had not lowered his phone once. He had adjusted the angle twice to keep both officers clearly in frame. His geometry homework had slid off his lap onto the seat beside him. He wasn't thinking about it. The camera had now been recording for 11 minutes, and neither Voss nor Briggs had any idea. At 7:31 p.m., Dale Voss made the mistake that would define the rest of his career. He reached for Rochelle's door handle from the outside. He didn't swing it open. He gripped it. A warning. A show of where things were going if she didn't comply. It was the kind of move designed to remind someone who was in control of the situation. What it actually did was end his. Isaiah sent the video at 7:33 p.m. He didn't post it publicly right away. He sent it first to his mother's paralegal, a woman named Dara, who had her number saved under Aunt Dara, even though they weren't related, because she had been in their lives long enough to feel like it. The message he sent with it had no punctuation and no drama. It just said, "Watch this and do what Mom would do." Dara watched it once, picked up her phone, and started making calls. By 8:15 p.m., the video was in the hands of two journalists, a county commissioner, and the executive director of the Caldwell Civil Liberties Union. By 9:47 p.m., it was online. By midnight, it had been viewed 340,000 times. What made the video land so hard wasn't just what Voss said. It was what he never did. In 17 minutes of footage, Dale Voss never once ran Rochelle's plates. The one action that would have resolved the entire stop in under 90 seconds, the one thing a legitimate stolen vehicle check requires first, he never did it. The video showed him approaching, demanding, escalating, and calling backup, all before performing the most basic step of his own stated reason for the stop. That absence, that single missing procedure, told the whole story without anyone needing to narrate it. The comments on the video filled up fast, but it wasn't just people reacting emotionally. Other Black residents of Caldwell County started talking. And what came out of those conversations was a pattern that had been sitting in plain sight for years. 4 other drivers came forward within 48 hours. All Black. All stopped on or near Cedarwood Gate Boulevard within the last 14 months. All told, their vehicles matched a description. 2 of them had never received any documentation of the stop afterward. One man had been made to wait on the curb for 35 minutes before being told he was free to go, with no explanation and no record of why he had been held. None of them had known about each other until the video connected them. Then came the part that hit the hardest. A local investigative journalist pulled Meridian Protective Services stop logs through a public records request filed the morning after the video dropped. The logs, which the company was required to maintain under their county contract, showed 61 documented vehicle stops in Hills Estate over the previous 10 months. Researchers cross-referenced the data with the county's own demographic records for that zip code. Out of 61 stops, 47 involved Black drivers. Hills Estate's Black residential population was 12%. That number, 47 out of 61, moved faster online than the video itself. And then people found out who Rochelle was. Not just that she was an attorney. They found the case numbers. They found the 2022 appellate ruling where her name was on the winning brief against the 4th Precinct for an unlawful search pattern. They found the active case still sitting in pre-trial, involving 2 Black men stopped without cause in the same county. They found her firm's website, her photograph, her record. The woman Voss had gripped a door handle at, the woman he had talked down to for 17 minutes on Cedarwood Gate Boulevard, had been fighting his department in court for years. He had pulled over his own case. Dale Voss was suspended without pay on a Tuesday morning. He found out through a phone call that lasted less than 4 minutes. No meeting, no hearing, just a voice on the other end telling him to surrender his credentials and his contracted vehicle by end of business that day. Meridian Protective Services released a public statement the same afternoon calling his conduct inconsistent with their standards of professional engagement. It was careful corporate language designed to create distance. What it really meant was that he had become too expensive to defend. Colt Briggs received a formal written warning and was pulled from the Hills Estate contract pending review. His file, which had looked clean on the surface, now had people looking at it more carefully. That kind of attention has a way of finding things. The Caldwell County Commissioner's Office announced an independent audit of the Meridian Protective Services contract within 72 hours of the video going public. The HOA Board of Hills Estate, the same board that had renewed that contract twice without a single community vote, released a statement saying they were deeply concerned and committed to reviewing all patrol practices. 3 residents who had lived in Hills Estate for over a decade publicly called for the contract to be terminated entirely. the board scheduled an emergency meeting. The meeting filled up fast. At the 4th precinct level, the department announced it was reopening 2 previously closed cases involving stop-and-search complaints filed by Black residents in the Cedarwood Gate area. Both had been dismissed administratively without ever reaching a proper review board. The man who had been held on a curb for 35 minutes with no documentation hired an attorney of his own the week the video dropped. He didn't have to look hard for one. Rochelle didn't give interviews right away. She let the facts speak first, which is what good attorneys do. When she did speak, it was a single 4-minute statement outside her office on Harmon Avenue. No podium, no press release. Just her standing on the pavement in a gray coat telling the cameras that what happened to her on Cedarwood Gate Boulevard happened to people without her credentials every single day, and that the only difference was that those people didn't always have a son in the back seat who knew what to do. She said Isaiah's name once, then she went back inside. Isaiah didn't become a viral moment. He didn't do interviews either. He went to school the next morning, sat through his classes, and turned in his geometry homework 2 days late. His teacher accepted it without question. That week, one of his classmates asked him how it felt to take down a cop. Isaiah thought about it for a moment and said it didn't feel like anything yet. He said it felt like something that shouldn't have been necessary in the first place. That answer was more honest than anything any official statement produced that entire week. The active case Rochelle had been carrying against the 4th precinct, the one already sitting in pre-trial before any of this happened, was now drawing attention from the state attorney general's office. What had been a slow-moving legal process was suddenly something people in much higher offices wanted to be associated with. Justice has a way of moving faster when the lights are on. But here is the truth that sits underneath all of it. Rochelle went home that night, sat at her kitchen table and looked at her son. And what she felt wasn't victory. It was the weight of knowing that everything had to go exactly right. The recording, her composure, her credentials, her contacts. For anything to happen at all. Most people don't get all of those things at once. And the ones who don't are still out there, pulled over on quiet streets, being spoken to like verdicts have already been reached, with no camera running and no case number waiting in a courtroom. That is the part that kept Rochelle up at night. Not what happened to her, what was still happening to everyone else. If this story made you feel something, then you already understand why this channel exists. Resurrected Justice is here for every story that deserved to be told but almost wasn't. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs to see it, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Every view, every share, every comment keeps this work alive. We'll see you in the next one.